What an amazing project. Now, our first panel discussion about the remembrance of the Holocaust, Three Generation, Three Perspectives. The moderator is Eliyah Havemann, author of the book Wie werde ich Jude? How to Become a Jew, cybersecurity expert, and the husband of this lady next to me. But before Eliyah starts his panel discussion, he speaks with a Holocaust survivor, Naftali Fürst, who he visited some days ago in his house in Haifa.
Good evening and welcome to our panel with the name Three Generations, Three Perspectives. Tonight we're going to speak with three people from all generations after the Holocaust: a survivor, a child of a survivor, and a grandchild. We want to understand their perspective on remembering the Holocaust and what it means to them. We're also going to speak to two experts in the field, and I'm going to host you tonight. My name is Eliyah Havemann. I'm a book author. I published a book about Judaism in Germany some years ago, and today I work in the Israeli high-tech industry as a product manager. The first member of this panel is Naftali Fürst, and I'm very happy that he found the time to speak to us. Naftali, du bist in Bratislava in der Slowakei geboren. Warum sprichst du so gut Deutsch?
Ich bin geboren in Bratislava, in der Seite von, was Nähe zum Österreich ist. Das heißt Petržalka. Das ist eine Vorstadt von Bratislava. Und meine Muttersprache war Deutsch. Bis ich war 6 Jahre, habe ich nur Deutsch gesprochen zu Hause.
Diese Sprache der Täter war sehr lange tabu für dich. Was hat dich dazu bewogen, wieder Deutsch zu sprechen?
Ich habe geschwört, dass ich werde nie Deutsch sprechen nach der Shoah und ich werde nie nach Deutschland kommen oder nach Österreich. Und im Jahr 2005 hat man mich eingeladen, das erste Mal besuchen das Konzentrationslager Buchenwald, wo ich war, befreit. Am 11. April 1945. Und jetzt war das im Jahr 2005. Und das war meine erste Reise nach Deutschland nach dem Krieg. Und wann ich war schon im Buchenwald, dort habe ich das erste Mal angefangen, wieder Deutsch sprechen.
War das ein befreiendes Gefühl oder ein beklemmendes Gefühl, endlich wieder die Muttersprache zu sprechen?
Überhaupt zurückkommen nach Deutschland, das war für mich eine sehr schwere Zeit und ein schweres Erlebnis. Ich habe gesehen, das erste Mal nach dem Krieg, die deutschen Polizisten und Zollamt, das war für mich ein nicht gewöhnlicher Erfang. Ich habe das nicht so gut gefühlt mit dem. Mit der Sprache habe ich keine schwere Probleme. Nur das, dass ich könnte nicht so gut sprechen, weil ich habe schon vergessen, wenn man 60 Jahre eine Sprache nicht spricht, dann vergisst man.
Du hast nie Wiedergutmachungen in Form von Geld von Deutschland angenommen. Und die Begründung ist, dass kein Geld der Welt aufwiegen kann, was dir angetan worden ist, was deiner Familie angetan worden ist. Wie beurteilst du heute generell die Bemühungen der Deutschen in der Wiedergutmachung und in der Aufarbeitung?
Was ist mir sehr leid, dass auch heute sind in Israel Leute, Überlebende, dass sie leben sehr schwer und sie haben Probleme, die minimale Probleme zum normales Leben. Und das tut mir sehr leid und ich hoffe, dass jemand wird das hören und wird diesen Leuten helfen, weil es gehört ihnen nicht, dass sie sollen auch die letzten Jahre so schwer leben. Und wir sind schon sehr wenige Leute. Die meisten sind schon nicht da. Und jetzt wir haben nur, ich glaube, nur 5 Jahre, 6 Jahre jemand. Und dann ist schon alles Schluss und die Überlebenden sind schon nicht auf dieser Welt.
Viele junge Deutsche wollen heute mit dem Thema Holocaust eigentlich nichts mehr zu tun haben. Die sagen, das waren nicht wir, das ist lange her, lass uns mal einen Schlussstrich ziehen. Was sagst du denen?
Schauen Sie, ich kann Ihnen sagen, dass ich schon 15 Jahre erzählt meine Geschichte, da in Israel, in Yad Vashem, in Schulen. Und ich bin vielmal eingeladen, nach Deutschland und nach Österreich zu kommen. Und ich war in viele Schulen und ich erzähle und mit dem, dass ich erzähle meine Geschichte, mache ich, was ich soll machen, dass man das Shoah nicht vergisst. Und ich fühle, wenn ich komme zu den Schulen, sie sind froh, dass ich dort bin und ich fühle einen guten Kontakt mit den Leuten und mit den Schülern. Und ich habe so ein Gefühl, dass es ja interessiert. Aber ich habe auch getroffen, dass ich war in einer Schule und sie haben keine Ahnung gehabt von Shoah oder so etwas. Aber im Großen, ich bekomme dort eine große Ehre. Ich war voriges Jahr in Weimar. Dort ist ein Festival Ahava und dort war ich in 5 Schulen und man zeigt dort meinen Film, meinen Lebensfilm von meiner Befreiung in Buchenwald und ich bekomme dort sehr große Ehre.
Was würdest du konkret sagen, wenn jemand sagt, Schlussstrich, ich habe damit nichts zu tun? Das waren vielleicht meine Großeltern, aber mich interessiert das nicht mehr, ich möchte nicht mehr mit der Schuld konfrontiert werden.
Ich sage auch immer, die Frage ist in den Schulen, ob sie noch schuldig sind. Und ich sage, die Kinder, was ich treffe jetzt, die jungen Leute, sind nicht schuldig. Aber ich kann ihnen nicht verzeihen. Ich habe kein Recht verzeihen in meine jüdischen Kameraden sind dort gestorben. Meine Familie ist viele Leute dort ermordet. Und ich habe kein Recht für die Menschen, was nicht leben, verzeihen. Ich sage immer, verzeihen kann ich nicht, aber sie können nur glauben, dass sie sind nicht verantwortlich. Verantwortlich waren ihre Eltern oder Großeltern. Sie sind nicht schuldig, aber vergessen so eine Tragödie, so eine große Massenschlacht in der Europa kann man nicht und darf man nicht vergessen.
Du hast deine Geschichte aufgeschrieben in einem Buch. Ich habe da ein bisschen durchgeblättert. Das ist für mich nicht so leicht, muss ich sehr ehrlich zugeben, auch die Fotos zu sehen. Fändest du es wichtig, wenn in Deutschland Jugendliche deine Geschichte lesen und wenn ja, warum?
Ich glaube überhaupt, dass die Geschichte von Shoah ist sehr wichtig erzählen und lesen, weil wenn es keine Bücher sind oder keine Filme sind, wird man das schnell vergessen, weil solche Leute wie ich, Überlebende, sind schon sehr selten in der Welt und viele Leute können schon nicht erzählen, weil ich bin schon jetzt 88 Jahre alt und ich kenne viele meiner Kameraden, dass sie sind schon gestorben und viele können nicht erzählen, weil sie schon haben keine Kraft zu dem. Darum glaube ich, dass die Dokumentation ist sehr wichtig zu dem Problem Erinnern die Shoah. Viele Fragen kommen von den Schülern und überhaupt von dem Publikum. Die Frage, ob ich glaube in Gott. Weil in dem Film habe ich gesagt, wenn ich war in Auschwitz und ich war sehr verzweifelt und ich war schon ganz allein und ich habe mir gemacht eine Prüfung und ich habe gesagt, jetzt werde ich den Gott schimpfen. Und ich habe gewartet und ich habe gewartet und nichts hat passiert. Und ich sage auch in dem Film, dass dort in Auschwitz habe ich verloren meine Emunah, in Gott.
Mein Vater, als er gehört hat, dass ich religiös werde, fand er das im ersten Moment gar nicht so schlecht, weil er dachte, ja, Judentum, da mehr darüber zu wissen, ist ja gar nicht so schlecht, weil er selber eben nicht so viel weiß über die jüdische Religion. Aber dann hat er mit mir geschimpft. Er hat gesagt, wie kannst du nach der Shoah an Gott glauben? Und ich habe keine gute Antwort. Ich habe wirklich keine gute Antwort und ich werde auch, deswegen habe ich dich nicht danach gefragt. Ich werde niemanden irgendwie versuchen, in die Bedrängnis zu bringen, sich dazu zu positionieren. Ich kann nicht beurteilen, was ihr durchlebt habt. Ich kann es nicht mal nachfühlen. Und ich weiß, dass manche Leute das näher zu Gott bringt, weil sie einen Halt brauchen. Und andere Leute sagen, wie kann es einen Gott geben, der sowas zulässt? Und da halte ich mich Gott sei Dank raus, so gut ich kann. Naftali, ich danke dir vielmals. Danke, dass du mich in deinem Haus willkommen geheißen hast. Und ich hoffe, dass du noch viele Menschen mit deiner Geschichte berühren kannst und hilfst dabei, die Erinnerung lebendig zu halten.
Okay, vielen Dank.
Yeah, good evening. That was a very, very touching moment for me as well to meet Naftali. And now for the second generation, I want to introduce to you Michael Shubitz. And Michael, as you can see from the background of his image, is working as a camera operator for the German television. And he lives in Tel Aviv. He's from Lithuanian origin. He is a child of Holocaust survivors. He is also a Yom Kippur War veteran from the IDF. And in 2001, he witnessed the Hamas terror attack on the Tel Aviv Dolphinarium. And that really changed his life. And in a way that he wouldn't expect. So, Michael, you only started researching your family history when your parents went through after a long time after they passed away. Can you explain why?
Well, as you mentioned, as an outcome of the Dolphinarium explosion, me as a cameraman and my assistant, we were very early there. It was by a mere chance of many factors. It was a Friday night, the roads were opened. I am a Tel Avivian, so I knew how to get there. I got there very quickly, and suddenly these people were dying in front of me, lying there. And it was really a view that could not be overcome easily. A month later, I heard my wife talking to a friend of mine who lives in England, and she said to me, maybe it will not be a good idea to send Mickey to you because Mickey is not okay. And that made me the first time realize that really something is wrong with me. And I went to ask for help, and my help was a psychologist. And pretty quickly, we came upon a very dark chapter, a very dark picture in me, and that's the Holocaust history of my parents. And and she asked me, what do you know about your parents? And I said, actually nothing, because my parents never told me anything. And I said, and she said to me, well, you better go and research and find out, because you are sitting in a big barrel of monsters, and they must come out. What do you know? So I said to her, listen, I know, for instance, that my mother saw how her father is being killed. She was a child and she was watching it from the window. She said to me, I'll give you an idea. If you go to this window where your mother, if you manage once to go to this window where your mother watched your grandfather being killed, this may cure something in you, because there is something in you is unsolved. And this is actually what made me start this way to solve the problem that I managed to understand that I carry in me.
So the psychologist suggested that you would go and really work up what happened to you, what happened to your family, and the knowledge that you found out with all of your research that you did it help? Was it a relief, or was it a burden on you that you now understood what was really going on?
Well, one has to understand, I'm sure it's a human factor that is common to many people, also from different backgrounds. There was a door in me that was closed, and once I opened it, it changed my life. Suddenly I saw and I started looking at things all the time in the perspective of the Shoah, personally, but also generally. I mean, you know, if you hear, let's say 5 years ago, there was a crisis in Europe, and suddenly it was just a little crisis. Many refugees looked for refuge, like my parents, you know. Although I believe that you cannot relate the Shoah to anything else, nevertheless, the Syrian people who fled to Europe and were asking for help, I could identify with them very much. Although the Syrians are behind the border, actually our enemies, suddenly I felt a lot of compassion for them. And look here, in the little crisis in Europe opened so many Pandora boxes with devils, and suddenly there was the AfD in Germany, and I judge everything that is happening around me politically and personally today on the background of the Holocaust. The fact that the AfD and the Pegida started to demonstrate made me very sensible to this suffering of other people, which is something that I always had. Once you grow in a house of people who were going through what my parents went through, you are grown with a heart for the suffering of the other one. And this became stronger, I could say, in me.
It's what you just told me is it's a little bit dangerous, because some Germans think that because we as a Jewish people went through the Holocaust, that the Holocaust was some kind of institution that made us better people. So how can you, I don't know, do that, what you do to the Palestinians after you went through the Holocaust? And I always strictly object that, because, you know, the Holocaust was nothing to, it's, you know, wasn't a school where you could go through in order to learn for life. But on the other hand, I can see from your answer that it did something to you, and it allows you to have more compassion about what's going on in the countries around us.
Yes. But listen, of course, I live in a place that is very problematic, and it's far from being perfect, but there is no comparison to anything. What I learned about what my parents went through and my people went through, what I knew before, and so you cannot relate the Holocaust to anything in the history at all. I'm sorry, but you know, it's not because it's mine and it's unique, but because it was an industrialized killing, and it allowed, let's say, my parents, you know, came from Lithuania, and in Lithuania, 98% of the Lithuanian Jews were killed, were murdered, the women were raped before, the property was stolen and taken, and this is not something that you can compare with anything else in history. There were 235,000 Lithuanian Jews, and the 8,000 were left, also my parents. That made me, of course, wonder a lot about why, and this is something that you hear also from many survivors, why me? Why, what, you know, what happened in the world and in the history of my parents, and still they survived, and I could come to this world, and suddenly it made me appreciate a lot my own life. You know, what I see it as a big present. Suddenly, I,
Yeah.
I I can cherish a lot more.
What you just said is your parents felt like, why me? Why did I survive and not my surrounding? Is that one of the reasons why your parents never spoke about the Holocaust and just, never put that burden upon you? Or what do you think? What was the reason not to speak about it?
You know, my parents died pretty young. I learned that the older you get, the more you get the understanding that you have to inherit your story to the next generation. My parents died, my father died in the beginning of the 70s, last century. My mother died 15 years later. Both did not reach their 60th birthday. And I think it's a very combined. First of all, they wanted, we grew up in a new state. Suddenly, they came to Israel, and suddenly the cards were mixed again. And they were, first of all, very happy to start life anew. They were still young. They got suddenly a family, children, and they could be happy about surviving. And that was their interpretation. I had in my class, let's say, children where the parents were so traumatized that they they couldn't grow their children properly. I remember, people, children coming to the class and saying, "I couldn't sleep tonight because my mother was screaming about the Holocaust the whole night," and things like that. Well, that was not my case. I grew up in a happy family. But now I ask myself, of course, my parents were also playing something for us. They were not allowing themselves to. So partly also, I'm sorry to say, but the Israel of the in its first years was praising a lot the new Sabra image. And the Holocaust survivors were those who surrendered easily, those who they were ashamed. They were ashamed that they went through what they went, and so they didn't talk about it. But mainly, I'm sure my parents were convinced that it's not healthy for us to know what they went through. I remember, let's say, my mother playing with her friends' cards, and they were chatting, and suddenly I go into the room and silence, because they were talking about the Holocaust between themselves, and these were things we were not allowed to hear. I'm convinced today that those who were told everything and those who were told nothing share the same problem.
Okay. Michael, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing your story and being so open also about your traumatizing event in your life. It was a real pleasure to talk to you. And now I want to move to our next panelist, Keren Knoll. She's representing the third generation, and she was born in Israel. She lived many years in France. Her mother, Mireille Knoll, survived the Holocaust by escape, and her grandfather, Kurt, survived Auschwitz-Birkenau. And in 2018, something really, really bad happened. Her grandmother was brutally murdered by a Muslim neighbor and friend while living in France. So, Keren, how much did your grandparents tell you about what happened? We just heard from Michael that he didn't really hear much, but I have the feeling that the third generation actually was in a position to hear more. Is that true?
I was young when my grandfather was alive, so I couldn't ask the questions. My grandmother knew from what he told her, it wasn't a lot because it was 4 years in Birkenau from 14 to 18. So after they got married, he wanted to prove something, I believe, and went back to Germany and spoke German. So it was something in him that he wanted to to achieve. So actually, 2 years ago, I asked my father got sick, and I told him, we don't really know nothing about your side of the family, and you should ask, you should see what's going on there before it's too late. And I was talking about him because he was very sick, and he took the mission. He went back and asked my grandmother and asked his uncles and got back really with a story about what happened. So that's how we know what we know. And then my grandmother got murdered, so we didn't expect that. But we do know that she escaped with her father. He was working with clothes. He was bringing clothes to France, so he had a Brazilian passport. So they escaped with this passport to Brazil, and then they moved to Canada. And after a few years, they came back to France.
Okay. I'm also like from the third generation, and I grew up without a grandfather and without knowing where he would be buried because there was no grave. And it did change me as a person. What happened to you? Did the whole story shape you as a person, or were you able to, build your life independently of that?
I think there's two parts of me, maybe three. I will try to explain. I think the Holocaust, as a young person, was for me like a movie. Like if I was there, I would have been a partisan. I will fight the Nazis. Like in the Inglourious Bastard, I will be like that.
Yeah, I love the movie for that only because it gave us a feeling.
It's a great movie.
How could it have been?
And the second part of me is after I had children, and that's something totally different. Like every Holocaust day, it's like I'm going through my personal Holocaust. It's my personal graving, and it was nothing to do with my grandmother. So the third part, I will say, it's now that I'm taking a part in telling her story, in being her representative and her voice. So that's why I'm here tonight.
Which we are very thankful about. Your grandmother was brutally murdered. And so I think you're the right person to ask this question. Do you think the Holocaust can happen again anywhere in the world?
I think there's some Holocausts that are already happening in Africa, for example. But let's just put the right terms. Holocaust is dehumanization of a religion. It's taking someone who is a group of people that have a religion and saying, those are not human beings. This is what the Holocaust did. It wasn't a war. We had a lot of war. We won the most of our wars, but the Holocaust was really taking the Jewish and saying they are not real people. They're not deserve living. And I must tell you, in the 90s, we were living in France, and I had a nanny, a Polish nanny. So in the 90s, it was 45 years after the war, right? And my mother told her, listen, we don't need your service anymore because we're leaving to Israel. And she said, why? What? Why? Why are you leaving to Israel? The Jewish people over there. Now she lived with us. And we're not like religious and everything, but she lived in our house. And my mother told her, we are Jewish. And she said, no, you're not. Jewish have tails and big nose. You're not Jewish. And she said, wow. Yes, we are. And she was like 20 something. And it was 45 years after the war. So she couldn't know. She wasn't there. So she was like the second or third generation. And that's what they keep saying 45 years after the Holocaust. So, can it happen again? When we talk, you told me if it will happen again, they need people to let it be. And I don't believe that people will let it be. There was 30,000 people who walked the Marche Blanche after my grandmother was murdered from all the races. There was Muslim, there was Christian, everybody was there for showing their solitude and to say, no, it would not happen in my watch. So.
That's beautiful. So we are the third generation. What do you think is our task in this world to keep the memory of the Holocaust alive? You just mentioned already that you think that one of your duties is to tell your grandmother's story. What can we do in order to keep the memory alive for the next generations?
You know, every Pesach, we're telling the story of the exodus of Egypt, and we're telling the children that there was Paro and it was very bad for us, and we fight it, and then God saved us, and we escaped 40 years, etc., etc. So every year we're doing that because that's what happened. But we can go to Egypt and see in our own eyes what happens and where. In Israel, at the age of high school, there's a Masa to Poland. It's like a journey to Poland. And we're taking our young students and soldiers to see with their own eyes what happened. And they're going to the camps and they're learning the history. And there's a lot of preparation before that because mentally it's very, very difficult. And I think that this journey to Poland should apply with all high schools and not only the Jewish and not only in Israel. So people will see, because I'm sure that in Poland, this nanny that we had, she didn't go there. She didn't know. And maybe she went back to her mother and said, how you didn't tell me what happened? Why you didn't tell me? I didn't know.
In Poland, yeah.
Yes. There are houses like 100 meters from the camp. People are living there. It's
Yeah, you know, I until today I refused to go to Auschwitz. My grandfather was murdered there, and I don't want to see it. Maybe I will change my mind. I don't know what's going to happen when my kids, you know, will be in the age where they will be sent to these camps. Thank you very, very much. Thank you for joining us today, and I hope you'll stay in touch. It was very great talking to you. The next member of our panel is Barbara Glück. Barbara, she's from Austria. She's a historian. She used to work as a teacher. She received a doctorate from the University of Vienna in 2002. And now she's doing exactly what we just talked about. She's running a memorial. She's the director of the Mauthausen Memorial in Austria. Can you give us some explanations and some words about what are you doing in Mauthausen?
Hello. First of all, I would like to say that it's quite hard for me to talk after the first, the second, and the third generation, and I'm really touched by the words I just heard. For me, working at the Mauthausen Memorial, I used to say that Mauthausen is a very special place. It is a place where people were murdered. So it is a cemetery. It is a place of commemoration. And today, I like to say it's a young place. Young people, they come to the memorial. And it's a place where people can discuss, where people can talk about what happened. And people sing and commemorate, and that not now in these times, but normally. And it's a place of pictures and a place of memories and a place of life stories. And for more than that, Mauthausen is not only a place. Mauthausen is a topic, is an issue of today, and it's a kind of commitment So we talk about more than only Mauthausen as a place, than Mauthausen as a commitment of us working at the memorial and everybody who comes visiting the memorial. And that is, I think, that is very special for a memorial like Mauthausen.
A memorial in Austria, you have to say, right?
In Austria, yes.
Yeah.
And Mauthausen is the biggest memorial in Austria, with some other memorials. And I'm really sorry. It was the whole time really easy for me, but now exactly in that moment, my son enters to the room. Yeah.
That's what happens in Corona times when we do
I'm sorry,
when we do live from home.
For the whole time, it was quite silent, but now, okay, he's.
That's perfectly fine. So you already said that young people come to the memorial. Is that your target audience, or?
We're still blessed when you have survivors at our memorial, and we can guide them and we can talk to them and discuss them. But they are rare moments. It's quite often that we can welcome families of people murdered at the Mauthausen concentration camp, or former prisoners. We have national and international guests. Of course, it's important for us to say it's an important group when young people come to the memorial, but we would like to talk to everybody, and not only to visitors coming to the memorial. We would like to reach also people they had no idea. The Mauthausen Memorial, it exists or not. We would like to reach people all over the world, and as we recognize that even in that last month with Corona, that it's possible with the digital world that gives us the possibility to, when we want and when we find the right words, we can talk to everybody. And that should be our ambition.
Do you think that people that went to the memorial and saw with their own eyes what happened, are they more immune to, conspiracy theories, not only about the Holocaust, whether it happened or not, but also about other kind of conspiracies that are going around? You think it's an important way to teach about conspiracies as well, because that's a hot topic today?
Our main question at the memorial is, and we ask that everybody who comes to our memorial, is what does this have to do with me? And it's not us that we give you the answer, it's you, and it's everybody. And we encourage them to think about it. And what I would like to say is, there is no guarantee. There is no guarantee that you're aware of racism, of anti-Semitism, of any kind of hate. But I'm convinced that we can push everybody to open their eyes, to open their mind, and to think about it. And what we can see at the memorial, and there's our experience, that when we discuss the topics of the past and the present, and to build the bridges, that people think and people discuss. The main question is, do they keep anything in their mind when they go back? We tried. Yeah.
If they go out.
Sorry.
Yeah. So no. What I would love to believe is that those people that came to your memorial and then go back to their daily life, that they some kind of become a vaccine, for the population, so that when they hear a conspiracy theory, that they will object and say, no, I've seen it, it's different.
That is what we were working for, what we are working for, and I can only say, I hope. I'm a positive person. I'm convinced that we can reach something. It's hard to say, and I don't want to give a guarantee, and I cannot give a guarantee for being a better person when they go out of my memorial. But we would like to ask we ask questions. And when you come to our memorial, you have many questions, and you have a kind of idea what it looks like and what happened there and whatever. But what we would like to reach is when you go home, when you go back home with more questions than you came to our memorial. Yeah. Because you start
coming to questions. Coming to questions. I have to cut you off a little bit because I still want to speak to Elishav, and we're running out of time a little bit. We have a question that we got from one of the people that signed up for the event, and I'm very happy about that. We encourage people to send questions. And Anna from Berlin sent a very interesting question. She says, how can we persuade the government to invest in education to prevent the Holocaust from happening again? Because you also rely on government money, right?
Yes, it's very important for me to say that it concerns us all. It concerns everybody, and it's not only a topic for me as a director or for all memorials or for teachers or students. It should concern everybody. Yeah? And I would like to underline that because it's an investment in people, and of course, it's my job and it's the job of our memorials that we have to convince. We have to convince politicians. We have to convince people. We have to convince adults to bring the children, teachers to bring the students. I think that's very important. Yeah, not only to work with people coming to the memorial. We have to convince that we get the support, that we have the teacher that we can work with, and we have the politicians that they support us also financially.
Thank you very much, Barbara. It was great talking to you, and good luck with your work. And I hope that you will reach many people with your memorial. Elishav Rabinovith was with us today. He is the community manager of the Zikaron Basalon project. The Zikaron Basalon means memory in your living room. So he doesn't have to convince people to come to him. He is actually going to the people. He has an MA in Talmud Studies and in Basalon University, and he's running the Zikaron Basalon. And can you tell us what you're doing exactly, Elishav?
Basically, Zikaron Basalon is an initiative that started 10 years ago, with the idea that the only way to connect to something is to bring it to the houses of people, to be part of their lives. I believe personally, and the initiative believe that museums are not enough, and we actually the most powerful way to maintain a memory is to have it in rooted and embedded in the calendar, as in a annual event that happens with the public everywhere in the world. And we have the concept of other holidays that commemorates things that Passover, like we all know that we have 3,000 years of traditions, of local tradition, that everyone does it in his own way. And we believe that the Holocaust is big enough and to create another, not holiday, but like a ritual, a day of memory in the calendar for years.
So you're working with survivors that come into the living room today, right?
Yeah, actually.
Which countries are you active in?
So we started in Israel, and really fast it grew to all over the world. We know about like 60 different countries, but it's a real decentralized. Everyone can do it. It's just like a format that you can actually do in your house. So we don't keep track of all the events. They don't have to register. We ask them to, so we can know. But a lot of people are doing it without even knowing that there is an organization which is good.
So you feel like you're inspiring people to adopt this this method of bringing memory to the people. We heard from Naftali, and it's sadly it's true. In like 5 years, there will be no more survivors left. What's your plan to do this in the future? How should we continue?
So it started when we realized that we won't have the survivors forever, and we cannot rely on them. So we need to make it a real something that actually touches the people. So people sitting around, and at the beginning it was what brought people, but after the Zikaron Basalon is not just a lecture from a Holocaust survivor; it's a whole dynamic, a discussion that comes after the discussion, after the lecture, the speech, and a meeting and gathering. And we found and realized that the gathering might be even more powerful than the talk. And some people really want to come together and talk about different issues and bring and give new ways to look at the events and their personal stories. And so we're doing the second generation. This year we had a major phenomena when on the lockdown we did it on Zoom, and it was really it was April, so it wasn't we didn't know if people will actually show up to Zoom. And not just that we have more events than ever, and we found out later that a lot of the second generation rose to the occasion and realized that it's their own. It's on their own. I'll tell you, my mother spoke for the first time in her life. Why? She just felt that it's time. Now when we have the lockdown and the survivors that are with us couldn't participate, the second generation just felt that it's true, it's time. And we have hundreds of them in Israel that spoke for the first time. So,
you can invite Michael. I guess he would be happy to volunteer. As a last question that you can answer for all of us, because we saw all of these ways to keep the memory alive, and still anti-Semitism seems to be on the rise, while anti-Zionism is on the rise. Does it actually help, or are we just without all of this it would be worse? What do you think?
I'm not doing it as opposing anti-Semitism. I'm doing it as a way to cure and help my people. I think we never really dealt with meaning of our loss, personal loss, our grandparents, and it's more like a healing session for a whole country. The anti-Semitism is will come later. I do believe that dealing with it will. Part of it is thinking of why and how it happened, but it's not the focus, and it's barely comes up in the meetings. It's more like people bringing personal things, they talking from the heart to heart. It's not a discussion about geopolitics and mostly.
Elishav, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Good luck with your project. It's a wonderful idea. When it comes to the third generation, call me.
It's already there.
Okay. Thank you, everybody who was watching this, joining us for this panel, 3 generations, 3 perspectives. I hope you learned something. I hope you understand the perspectives of those 3 generations and why it is so important to keep the memory alive. Not the memory of the Holocaust as a whole, but also the memory of all people that are suffering from it until today, because I think it touched all of our lives first generation, second generation, third generation. And people seem to misunderstand that even for us in the third generation, like Keren and I, still have to deal with it every day. So thank you very much for watching, and enjoy this wonderful summit. And I hope you enjoyed the panel. Thank you very much.